I started collecting stone stuff right from the beginning because I wanted my son, who was 8 months old when I joined the band in December '62, I wanted to keep a few things so he knew that I was once in a band and we made a record and we were on TV once, or we were played on the radio twice or something, because that's all we thought it would be in those days. So I started collecting then, and of course it just carried on. It was quite tough, you know, in the early '60s, because you'd go out on these package tours or go to gigs up north or in the Midlands, but we were mobbed all the time, you know, attacked by the fans and all that, so there was no time to collect things, so I couldn't get a poster. I didn't have time to get it off the wall, or sometimes I got the occasional program or a ticket or a sticker or something in later times. But it was very difficult because we used to just rush in, go on stage, do the gig, get destroyed, and get off and get in police vans and be taken off to the hotel or something. And suddenly, you know, I didn't have time to get anything. The Vox AC30, which is in the auction, which is a yellow one. It's not the black or blue ones, it's earlier, it's very early '62. And that was like gold dust to them when they first saw that. It's a very big part of the Stones' history, that amp. Like Keith said, he went down on his knees and prayed for it when I brought it in. He didn't do that in front of me, probably when they took it back to the flat that evening. They used it on and off for years and years and years. Ian Stewart used to use it for the piano levels and things. He'd mic the piano up and stuff like that. He probably did it for Nicky Hopkins and Billy Preston. The Fender Mustang, which is '69-70, they're the 2 years I used it on the American tour, and then on the European tour. It was with Buddy Guy and Junior Wells, and that was a nice bass because it was the only Fender I could play, because it was a bit smaller than the rest of them. And also I understand now that it was one of the very last Fender basses that were ever made by Leo Fender himself. And it's orange, so it's kind of really cute. I used to play that with a Crystal Palace football shirt on, which was a striped one. So there's lots of pictures of me on this claret and blue striped shirt, so I'm very proud of that for both reasons. Travis Beans, they made 3 for me, which had got my name on the back with the date and everything, you know, in the metal. And I think that's more historically valuable. I used them all the time because they were a bass that I could play in the studio and play live. You can't always do that. I sometimes used to have basses that I could only record with, which weren't good live, and vice versa. And I'd have them, you know, for touring, but they didn't sound good in the studio. That was good in both studio and on stage. But I had to be very careful like that, you know, because it was quite different. Because I would play very mellow on the sessions and try to sound a bit like a double bass, really. Whereas on stage, I had to play really hard, otherwise I wouldn't be heard with Keith and Ronnie, or Keith and Mick Taylor, or Keith and Brian. You know, they used to play at such volumes that I had to be in there as well, you know, otherwise I'd be not heard at all. I played STEINBERGERs, and that was a new version of the STEINBERGER. It looked like a gun, really. I wasn't sure about it, but a few bass players said, you know, it's got a really good sound, you should go for it. The guy from the Stranglers had it, Jean-Jacques Bonnell, who was a friend of mine. He had one, and there was a few other people. So I tried it, and I got a really good sound live with it. But once again, it wasn't good for a studio. And so it wasn't my favourite, and Keith hated it. I mean, he just likes normal things. He just didn't think it was right. Get a Fender, you know. He never regarded my little hands couldn't manage a Fender. I always wanted something from Brian, you know, because me and Brian used to be very close because we shared rooms in the early days. When Mick and Keith shared, Charlie and Andrew Oldham shared, and me and Brian shared. And it was always me and Brian that went out to the clubs while the others stayed in the hotels. playing with the local bands and all that. We'd do those sort of things. And so he gave me that in, I think it was in the early '69, probably about 3 or 4 months before he died. I got that, and I treasure that because it's a beautiful guitar. There's my silver boots, which stand in history. They probably helped to save me at one time in '75 when we were in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I was running off the stage as the last person, and there was a balcony above us, and there was a curtain underneath the balcony, between the balcony and the stage, and we were all running and just throwing our arms up and just touching the outstretched arms of the people on the balcony. And I was the last one, and I was doing it, and I jumped up because I'm a bit shorter than the rest of them. I jumped up and I came down and landed on a very thick power cables for the amps, and it threw me sideways, and I went and to stop myself against the wall behind the curtain, and there was no wall. I went straight through, fell 6 feet down with my bass, and luckily I didn't damage it, but I cut my head open, I broke the knuckle here, my hand was like a balloon, all my arm here was all the muscles here, they were pulled, I was knocked out. And then they were all getting in the cars and leaving, and Astrid, my girlfriend at the time, said, "Where's Bill?" And everybody looked around, and then someone ran back, the security ran back, and they saw my little silver boots poking out from the curtain, and I was just laying there knocked out. I used that a lot. I used to use it at home, doing songs and all that, and I also used it on my videos when I did White Lightning and all those things. It was a really nice guitar, that. And then when the auctioneer people checked it just a few months ago, they saw on the original case, very faintly, the original name of the Allman Brothers band. Before they were the Allman Brothers, there was another name. It's on there. He said, "Wait a minute, look, this is," I said, "I can hardly see it." He said, "Well, I can see it because I know what I'm looking at." He says, "And I'll tell you what, I've got another idea." So he opened the case and we took the guitar out, this beautiful guitar, which I never wanted to sell. And he turned it over, and they've usually got a metal plate on the back. We had two. And he says, "I'm sure this is the Allman Brothers." He said, "Look at this," and he opened the second one, and it was a stash for drugs. It was sort of cut out. There was this space which was cut out to put your drugs in and then seal it up. And of course, no one ever suspected going through customs to take the guitar apart or anything. And he said, "I can say pretty much that this did belong to probably Duane Allman in the early days, or one of the Allman Brothers." Of course I'm happy that the world is going to see it, because there's so much of it, and a lot of it, I've got the only copies now. There were a few special things that were made for me that I really found difficult to let go. Let's hope people can enjoy it half as much as I have collecting it, because some of it's really precious, and it should be looked after. As my wife says, it's part of my legacy.